So I got to say, never have I ever seen this country as divided as it is right now. Wow. Not in my lifetime. The dividing lines are not simply political. They're socioeconomic and racial and ideological and religious and generational and geographic and gender-based. I could go on, but we are divided. We are really divided. We are scary broken in our national unity. But I bring that up. This is not going to be a political message, so don't worry about that. There is one thing that everybody wants. I don't care I don't care if you're a builder, boomer, Gen Xer, or millennial. Whether you're male or female or progressive or conservative or black or brown or white or rich or poor or middle class, I don't care who you are, there is one thing you want. I know you want it because I want it. We've wanted this for as long as we've known that we want something. Our kids are growing up to want this. They may not use these words, but this thing that we all want is as elusive as it is desirable. And because of the lack of it, this is why we're experiencing this growing rage, because people are not finding this thing, this object of our desire, this great unmet longing. What is it? It's the good life. The good life is what you want. It's what I want. Now, what's interesting about this concept of the good life is that there are so many definitions of it. Depends on who you are. Back in the day, that's kind of funny, 350 BC. Back in the day, when Aristotle was essentially the first one to name it. It was called eudaimonia at the time. It meant human flourishing. He said, this is what we all want. We all want the good life, however we define it. Even in his day, in Aristotle's day, there was a disagreement. Aristotle, for instance, thought that the good life, you could define it by virtue. If you lived a life of virtue, you would experience a good life, where his fellow Greek philosopher Epicurus said, no, it's not about virtue, it's about pleasure. So we could go around and have a big conversation about how would you define the good life, but we would be all over the map. There are some people who would say, look, it's about meaningful relationships. Another person would say, no, the good life is when you have a strong sense of purpose. Another person would say, no, the good life is when you have a sense that you matter in this world. Whereas another person would say, no, it's about simplicity. That's the good life, simplicity. Another person would say, no, it's all about being kind. Another person would say, what are you talking about? It's all about having fun. Another person would say, it's doing what you want to do. That's the good life. Another person would say, no, it's having a steady focus. And another person would say, no, it's ecological sustainability. Another person would say, no, look, the good life is just having a nice house and a good income. Now, I didn't just make all those up. I actually did research on this. It's real easy. What is the good life? And everybody's willing to tell you what you're looking for, right? We're all over the map. When it comes to what makes up the good life, but I'm going to tell you one thing that is locked down solid for sure. We want it, and we want it now. The good life is such a high value in the American psyche that it has now become not just a desire, but a right. We feel it's our right. It has become an entitlement. The good life has become a demand. And of course, because so many people are not experiencing what they perceive to be the good life, well, they're angry. This is why there's such a growing rage. People are angry. I'm not experiencing the life that I feel is the good life. So the question is, let's stop talking about them out there. Let's talk about you. Would you say you are living the good life? And would you like to know how to experience it more than you ever have, which is a leading question, of course. Because over the next 2 months, I'm going to try to give you a taste of the good life. And we're going to give you, not just to give you a taste, it's not theoretical. We're going to show you clearly how to experience it. Now, we are going to use as our guide, of course, the best book ever written on the good life, which is the Bible. And we are going to look in depth at what Jesus meant when he said this: my purpose is to give people a rich and satisfying life. And you say, well, I don't know if I've ever heard. Well, I like that translation of John 10:10. You might have heard it as, I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly. But what Jesus is saying is, here's my purpose, here's my goal, is that everybody would get a chance to experience a flourishing life, or the good life. So over the next 9 weeks, that's a pretty long time for us to do a series. Next 9 weeks, we're going to explore ingredients of the good life. There are going to be a lot of eating themes, which makes me happy, being a foodie, right? So here's an analogy. Over the next 9 weeks, we're going to give you a tasting menu. All my foodie friends are going, yeah, I love tasting menus. I've only experienced it. You know what a tasting menu is? A tasting menu, I love it, is when chefs get to show off. Because when you go into a restaurant and you eat if you go in a restaurant that has a tasting menu, you don't tell them what they want. They tell you what they want to give you. And they give you a series. And it's usually wonderful because the chef goes all out and does these wonderful plates, and they're usually beautiful. I've only experienced it once. My wife and I got a gift to go to a restaurant in Manhattan in New York, and we did the tasting menu. And it was, I don't know what I ate, half of it, but it was absolutely wonderful. So that's what we're going to give you 9 courses. Over the next couple of months. You want to hear what they are? These are one word descriptors of the ingredients of a good life. This is biblical. This is not Dave's opinion. This is what we believe the Scripture teaches. When Jesus said, I have come that people might flourish and have the good life, he meant this. Here we go. This morning, we're going to look at freedom. Next week, fruitfulness. Week after that, credibility. Then impact and satisfaction and meaningful relationships and a sense of destiny or calling and peace. All of those are among some of those we'll be talking about over the next 2 months, are ingredients of the good life. And I'll say this again, we're not just going to just explain the good life. We're going to show you how you specifically can receive it, where to go to find it, and we're going to show you a very specific way in which someone else can help you get there. Okay? We're going to show you at the end, just about every one of these weeks, specifically how another person in your life can help you experience the good life. I'll explain as we go along. So with that introduction to the series, let us begin with the first ingredient of the good life, and that is freedom. Grab a Bible, turn to John chapter 8, verse 31. If you're going to get the Bible under the seat in front of you, that's page 758. 758. There are all kinds of connotations to the word freedom. Americans tend to use this word a lot. Give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry. Give me freedom. We realize that the first 10 amendments of the American Constitution, which we call the Bill of Rights, basically are my rights to be free. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. So there are a lot of connotations to freedom. I'm not talking about those connotations. Freedom as part of the good life is very specific. It's this: freedom from sin. Look at verse 31. Follow along as I read. To the Jews, I'm sorry, I got to stop right there. He's not talking about an entire race of people or an entire religion. He's talking about Jewish leaders. When you see the Jews in the New Testament, it's referring to the Jewish leaders. To the Jewish leaders who had believed in him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you really are my disciples. You are really my disciples. Then you'll know the truth. And the truth will set you what? Free. And they answered him, because at this point, they're confused. They misunderstand, and they say this. Verse 33, well, wait a minute. We're Abraham's descendants, and we've never been slaves of anyone. So how can you say that we shall be free? What on earth are you talking about? Now, they misunderstood. They thought he was talking about actual slavery to some other nation, slavery to some other system. No, he says in verse 34, that's not what I mean. Look what he says. I tell you the truth, anyone who sins is a slave to sin. Oh, okay. We're talking about slavery to sin. Verse 35. Now a slave, he goes on, has no permanent place in the family, but a son, a son belongs to it forever. Sorry about that. Verse 36, key phrase, key verse. So if the Son, the capital S, Son himself, sets you free, you'll be free indeed. So, hey, thanks, Greg. Jesus says, no, look, I'm not talking about slavery the way you're thinking about it. I'm talking about sin and how sin turns you into a slave and how I can set you free from that condition. So here's what Jesus was implying, if I can read between the lines a little bit. Sin is rarely an isolated act. Oh, from time to time, you do something, I do something, or we don't do something. Like, there are sins of what? Commission and sins of omission. In other words, sins we do and things that we should have done, but we did, So rarely do we sin, and it's a one and done deal. Because sin so quickly, so rapidly habitualizes that sin becomes sins, becomes sin patterns, becomes sin habits. That's why Jesus said in verse 34, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Because you get caught in this system. It's like the sin tsunami. It becomes one thing, and then it becomes another, and then another, and another, and soon the patterns and the habits are almost impossible to break. So let me get personal. That should scare you if I just say, let me get personal. I'm talking about sin. That should make all of us nervous. Okay? What is that thing you do? Rhetorical question, everybody. Don't answer this out loud. What is that thing you do, that sin of commission, or what is that thing you don't do, the sin of omission, that you know that flat out is sin? All right, you're thinking about it. I know you are. How long have you been stuck in that? Years? Does it feel like a lifetime? Do you see why Jesus said anyone who sins is a, what? Slave to sin. Because this is the way to think about this. And this goes without saying, but that is not the good life. To be a slave to sin. And notice what he says in verse 35, the implications. This is what happens when you're a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family. He's talking about the family of God. You know what happens when you do that thing you do again. You know how badly it makes you feel and how you absolutely know it isolates you from the presence of God. How many times have you done it? How many times have you thought it? How many times have you ignored what you should do and you find yourself once again on your knees? Here we go. God, I'm so sorry and please forgive me. And it's over and over and over again. It happens. Sin isolates us from the warmth of relationship with God. But don't miss verse 36. If you don't hear anything else I say this morning, just repeat these words over and over again in verse 36. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. You will be absolutely free. How does that work? Where does Jesus get the power and the right to say that he could free me from sin? Well, pardon me for being theological for a second here. Can we just be theological for a second? Because something happened in relationship. Two things happened in relation to what we celebrated last weekend that we can't miss when it comes to sin. The crucifixion of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. Because when Jesus was crucified, he provided an opportunity for every single one of us who surrender our lives to Jesus Christ to have the punishment of sin broken. If I surrender my life to Jesus Christ, I am forgiven. Whew, I think somebody needs to hear that. I think somebody in this room needs to hear that. Do you know that if you surrender your life to Jesus Christ, you are forgiven of your sins? Let that theological truth rumble around in your soul a little bit. But that's not all. You know, when Jesus rose from the dead, the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Ephesians, a group of people in Ephesus, and he said this: the power that was exerted when Jesus rose from the dead. Can we stop and just admit that it took some level of power to raise a dead body out of the grave? Okay, so here's what Paul said. The power that was exerted when Jesus was raised from the dead is available to all of us who believe. Resurrection power available to you. The crucifixion allows for you to be forgiven of your sins. The resurrection allows you to break the power of sin. Those are some truths you need to chew on. Now, the question you would have, if you are thinking with me right now, you probably should be thinking this question: how do I get a piece of that action? How can I taste this freedom you're talking about? Well, pardon me for being a broken record, okay? And if I'm going to be a broken record on something, it's going to be this. First and foremost, if you want to be free from the punishment of your sin and you want to be free from the power of sin, then you must surrender your life to Jesus Christ. And here's a little prayer, a simple but powerful prayer that will get you there. Jesus, I believe in you. I surrender to you and receive you into my life. In just a few moments, as you can see, the baptistry is open. In just a few moments, people are going to come down into that water, and I want you to watch their faces. Now, those of us who get to be in the tank, we get to see it inches away from their face. When they come up out of the water, I want you to watch their faces, because what their faces will tell you is, I am free. You can experience that too. You really can. If you surrender your life to Jesus Christ, Lord, I believe in you, I surrender to you, and I receive you into my life, you can be free from the punishment of sin, and you can be free in a way that you have the power to break sin's hold on you. Don't wait. Get baptized in a few moments. Get thinking about it now. We got clothes for you backstage. We've got fluffy towels, and we got people who will show you what to do back there. We're going to do that in just a few moments. Watch their faces. But before we experience that thrill, and last hour, I don't know what, how many have we baptized so far? What did I say? I don't know, dozens and dozens of people this weekend already. And it's a thrill. I want you to see that there's another type of freedom. We had freedom from sin. There's another kind of freedom that Jesus offers as a part of the good life, and it's, stay with me, it's the freedom from sin management. This is different. Sin management. Let me explain. So yeah, we're sinners. Have we established the fact that we're all sinners? Yeah. You, me, right? We all are. When you sin a long time, and some of us have been sinning a long time, you become quite skilled at managing it. Now, by managing it is that after a time, you start coming up with systems and processes to keep you from going out of your mind and to keep you from being perceived as a nasty human being. We manage our sin. I want you to like me. It doesn't make me any different than you. You want me to like you. And we all want people to like us. And so what we do, so what I do is I've constructed some fairly finely honed systems to make sure that you think I'm a pretty nice guy. If I told you the sins that I struggle with, that all would change really quickly. God knows what they are. My wife knows what they are. But I don't want you to know what they are. And that's what you do too. Let's be honest. You are a sin manager, and so am I. How do we do that? Well, one of the ways we do it is we cover it up. We become very adept at covering our sin. For instance, if you're an alcoholic, I am not an alcoholic. I pray that by the grace of God that doesn't happen to me, but for some of you it is part of your life. You have learned probably to cover it up. If you're not in recovery, you've learned to cover it up by drinking vodka, which is mostly odorless. And so you can cover up that struggle. That's just my illustration. Let me give you another illustration. If you're a philanderer, meaning that you're always pursuing relationship with the opposite gender, even though maybe you're already married, if you're a philanderer, you've become quite adept at covering that up by masking your steps, covering where you've been, lying. It's really quiet in here right now. If you are, you got a problem with pornography. Most of it's electronic these days. But you've probably found a way to cover that up electronically too. You see what I'm saying? We manage our sins. Everybody get what I'm talking about, managing sin? But we don't just, and if you're an abuser, you come off looking pretty good. A person who verbally abuses others, especially your family or your spouse, or maybe physically abuses even, sexually abuses. But you found a very clever way to cover that up so that everybody shakes your hands and thinks the moon is hung on you. How's that work? You're a sin manager. We don't just cover up. We also find a way to rationalize and justify. This is what I'm pretty good at, okay? So if I'm not going to be completely authentic this morning, don't worry. But I will tell you that this is what I'm good at because, sometimes we sin and this is the way we rationalize. It comes out like, you don't know my life. I kind of deserve. You know what I mean. I deserve this. How about this one? Have you ever heard somebody say this one? Well, I'm not as bad as her, not as bad as him, and I'm certainly not as bad as you. We rationalize, we justify. No one's getting hurt here. We don't just cover up, we don't just rationalize. One more way that we manage our sin is that we compensate. See, a sin compensator, and you might be one of these people, you've got a ledger in your brain. There is this little journal, and it's got 2 columns, and it's got the sin column and the good. There's bad you and good you. All right? And in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I know the bad me, I know the sins, but I have at least done enough that I hope that maybe I've done enough to balance out the good and the bad. You can tell right away who is a sin compensator. How many times have you heard a person say this? I've heard this numerous times. A person says, I hope I've been good enough for God to accept me. That's sin compensation. Did I go to church enough? Have I read the Bible enough? Did I give enough? We set up very elaborate systems to keep from sinning or making sure that we're balancing out enough. And it really gets hard when you get near the end of your life and a person is considering what's going to happen to me now, and they panic thinking, I sure hope I was good enough for God to accept me into heaven. That's a sin compensator. That's not freedom. That's not the good life. You need to be free from that. This is why Paul said to the Galatians, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again by the yoke of slavery, the slavery to sin management. Stop trying to manage your sin with religion and rules. Stop trying to compensate. This is not the good life. The good life is the life of freedom. Freedom from sin and freedom from sin management. I don't really care if you remember anything I just said, if you promise me you won't forget what I'm about to say right now. Okay? So I don't care if you don't remember anything else, please do not forget this. Jesus will set you free from sin. period. Jesus will set you free from sin. And one more time, broken record Dave, how does Jesus set me free from sin? I'm going to give you two very specific ways to experience freedom. And the first one is broken record Dave. You know what I'm going to say. You must surrender your life to Jesus Christ. Jesus, I believe in you. I surrender to you and receive you into my life. Friends, there is no need for you to stay in slavery. It is time for you to be set free. And if the Son, Jesus, sets you free, you shall be free indeed. So why don't you, in just a few moments, get out of your seat while we're singing our worship songs, come over here, I will meet you at the baptistry, we'll send you backstage, we'll give you some clothes to change into. Let's have you be baptized today, huh? Let's have you be baptized today. In that step of saying, I surrender. You come out of the water, you'll be a free person. I promise you. But before we go there, I have a second suggestion. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that when you surrender your life to Jesus, the punishment for sin is broken. You're not going to be punished for sin anymore. But I'm not naive to think that long-held sin patterns are going to go away like that. Okay? They're not. You know what you need? You need a little TLC to help you get through it. A little TLC, a little tender, loving care, a little more direction. You're going to need a few more answers. If so, I want to encourage you to take another step in experiencing the good life. I want you to find someone who will walk with you on what we call the way of discipleship. Well, what is that? You might be wondering. Well, listen, it's a process of walking with someone who is a few steps ahead of you, someone who has wrestled with life a little longer than you, someone who has been learning themselves what it means to follow Jesus and deal with their own sin, and they can help you do the same. And you're thinking, oh, I know what you mean. I need a counselor, right? Nope. No. Oh, don't get me wrong. That might be a very good idea, right? And we'll be glad to help you find a counselor, but I'm not talking about finding a counselor. And you're thinking, oh, I know what you mean. I need a friend in my life. Yeah, but no, I'm not talking about friendship. Everyone needs a friend or friends. That's not what I'm talking about. Oh, and you're thinking, oh, I know what you mean, Dave. I need a mentor. No, I'm not talking about, mentoring is great. Mentoring is finding someone you could occasionally, learn from. This is deeper than that. This is more specific than that. This is not just friendship. This is not just hanging out, and it's even more than mentoring. Here it is. The Way of Discipleship is an intentional, time-bound relationship focused on learning and embracing 11 practices essential to following Jesus. Now, if you're paying attention, you're going to see those 11 practices are going to end up being the ingredients of the good life. Okay, so you'll put two and two together eventually. It's one person following another person as that person follows Jesus. Learning freedom, learning fruitfulness, learning peace. So if you're all still with me, you probably are asking, well, ask the question, where do I find such a person? Well, they're already in your life. No. Yeah, they are. They really are. They're in your life somewhere. They're in your life. They're either in your family or where you work or where a group you're in, a church or something. They're in your life. No, I can't think. Think about it. God will reveal that to you. And then you can go to that person when God reveals who it is and you say, look, will you disciple me? Or maybe if you start praying about it, you might be shocked when somebody walks up to you and says, will you follow me as I follow Jesus? See, this is what you need. You need a little TLC. You need a little care. Now, if you decide you're going to do that, and if you need a little help, we'll help you with it. Eventually, we're going to want both of you to pick this book up. Now, there's no magic in this book. I know, because I helped write it, okay? There's no magic in here. All this book is tracks to run on in this discipleship relationship. We got plenty of them in the bookstore. You can get them on Amazon even. Pick this up, get in a discipleship relationship with a person, and let them, in a loving, tender way, take you by the hand and show you what real freedom is. It will change your life. Together, you will discover the ingredients of a good life, starting with freedom.